This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. We're just wrapping up week 3 for Donald Trump's war of choice against Iran. What we have so far is the world on the brink of recession, if not depression, massive inflation, death, destruction, no end of this in the foreseeable future, a stronger Russia, a weaker America, global famine getting worse, and a stronger Iran. So Trump's plan is working. If his plan was to destroy everything, he's a genius. Half of all Americans polled say they believe Trump started this war in order to distract from the Epstein files. A new CBS poll shows 92% of the American people want this war over immediately. It remains the most unpopular war in modern American history. 66% say this is a war of choice. 57% of Americans say it's going badly for our country. In other words, they don't think Trump is winning. We're not winning in Iran. Now, if 57% of Americans say it's going badly, that doesn't mean 43% think it's going well. It means something like 20% aren't sure, 10% don't care, and probably 10% are stupid enough to think we're winning. 60% disapprove of this war entirely. This is the new CBS poll. And 68% accuse Donald Trump of not explaining to the American people what the hell he's doing in Iran. Usually, or normally, before going to war, a president addresses the American people and explains why. Donald Trump hasn't done that, unless you count his occasional calls into Fox and Friends. He keeps coming up with different reasons for launching the attacks. First, he said it's to get rid of the regime in Iran and bring democracy and freedom to its citizens. But before he launched the attack, his own intelligence agency said bombing Tehran won't topple the regime. It won't bring democracy. Israeli intelligence is now saying the regime has such an iron grip on the instruments of power, anybody in Iran who rises up to try to topple the government will be, quote unquote, slaughtered. Then Trump said he launched the attack to take out Iran's nuclear weapons program. But over the weekend, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who talked Trump into this, Netanyahu claimed the bombing campaign has totally wiped out Iran's ability to enrich uranium. War over, I guess. That's not the truth, what Netanyahu's saying, because our intelligence agencies told Donald Trump Iran gave up its nuclear weapons ambitions 23 years ago. So if Netanyahu wants to claim this current bombing campaign wiped out Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities, he's lying. At least their nuclear bomb enrichment capabilities. Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State and our National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio said the war was necessary because Iran was an imminent threat to the United States. He said America was in imminent threat of an attack by Iran. When asked why, Rubio said, and I'm not making this up, he said because Israel was going to attack Iran. He said because Israel was going to attack Iran, Iran would retaliate by attacking U.S. soldiers stationed in Iraq. That made Iran an imminent threat. That's why we had to go in. So the attack on Iran, as we all know, is a joint American-Israeli scheme. Israel and America in this are joined at the hip. So what Rubio was saying is we had to attack Iran because Iran was an imminent threat. And why was Iran about to attack us? Because we were about to attack Iran first, and they would retaliate. So that is what makes Iran an imminent threat. Tulsi Gabbard is our national intelligence director. All our government's intelligence agencies answer to to Tulsi Gabbard. She testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee and then the House Intelligence Committee last week. We know that the U.S. intelligence community prepared several assessments for Donald Trump, showing that Iran discontinued its nuclear weapons program in 2003. That would be 23 years ago. We've known this for years. But during her testimony, Tulsi Gabbard said only the president gets to decide if that intelligence assessment is accurate. Two separate stories, right? Trump claims we went to war because Iran had rebuilt its nuclear weapons program. Gabbard said during her testimony it had been completely demolished when we attacked Iran in June of last year. Well, that's a lie because they didn't have a nuclear weapons program in June of last year. But Trump is also occasionally telling that lie. Occasionally says, oh, we wiped out Iran's nuclear weapons capability in June of last year. That's when he's selling the war as regime change. But when he's selling the war because Iran is an imminent threat, then he lies and says, well, we knocked out their nuclear weapons program in June permanently, but they've rebuilt it. Trump is also claiming that the Iranian regime has been completely obliterated in the past 3 weeks. He insists it's a matter of days until the Iranian government is toppled. Tulsi Gabbard, during her testimony last week, said the regime is weakened, but still very much in charge. Gabbard refused to deny or confirm what was true, insisting just because our intelligence community offers an assessment, that doesn't necessarily make it accurate. She testified that it's up to the president to decide what the truth is. God help us. She refused to reveal what exactly is contained in her daily intelligence briefings when or even if she sits down with Donald Trump. Gabbard came across as a desperate apparatchik trying to keep her job, but the takeaway from her testimony is she believes Iran's nuclear weapons program is non-existent and that the Iranian leadership isn't disappearing anytime in the foreseeable future. She added, essentially, but what do I know? I'm not Donald Trump. So, why did we and why are we continuing to bomb Iran? On Saturday, Israel and the United States bombed Iran's Natanz Nuclear Facility. Why? The UN's nuclear agency said there appears to be no radiation leak, and that was confirmed by the Iranian military. Why did we bomb Natanz if we know Iran has no nuclear weapons ambitions? Because Israel and the United States wanted to drop a bunker buster bomb that weighs 30,000 pounds. Our military wanted one of its B-2 stealth bombers to drop a 30,000-pound bunker buster to see how deep it could penetrate the mountain where the Natanz nuclear facility is located. Iran, like Afghanistan was, like Ukraine is, Iran now is a proving ground for America's military-industrial complex, which needs to test its weapons in real-world combat situations so they can sell their weapons. This is a test to see what works and what doesn't. That's why we bombed a non-existent nuclear weapons facility. What's also being tested in the real world, in real-world combat situations, is Israel's and America's much vaunted missile shield. Knocking a drone or a ballistic missile out of the sky is incredibly expensive. Each interceptor costs at least $3 million, and they need to have precise guidance systems. Interceptors are way more expensive than what they're trying to knock out of the sky. These Iranian drones cost as little as $20,000 to make. So these interceptors, Golden Dome, Iron Dome, the Sling of David, they have all these different names for the missile shield. Sometimes these interceptors work. Most of the time, they work. But most of the time doesn't cut it. Israel says they have successfully intercepted 92% of Iranian missiles. That means 8% are getting through. Iranian missiles are hitting infrastructure in Israel and throughout the Persian Gulf. A 92% success rate doesn't cut it. Now, you may have read that the nuclear research facility and reactor in Israel is located in the southern Negev desert. It's 8 miles from the town of Dimona in Israel. 2 Iranian ballistic missiles over the weekend crashed into Dimona and another city. Didn't hit the nuclear facility, the nuclear research facility, but it was pretty disruptive and frightening to the Israelis because their much vaunted air defenses didn't knock these ballistic missiles out of the sky. Especially, you want to make sure no missiles get near the nuclear research facility in Dimona in Israel. This is not good. This is not good. Marco Rubio said attacking the Iranian Natanz Nuclear Facility over the weekend, quote, was an absolute moral imperative. A moral imperative? I hardly think the man who has overseen the largest cut to foreign aid in American history, billions and billions of dollars cut from foreign aid, resulting in close to 1 million people in the past year dying from malnutrition and lack of medicine. I don't think Marco Rubio should be taking any moral umbrage talking about imperatives. But I guess the guy who cuts food and medicine to impoverished people, resulting in at least 1 million dying in the past year, I guess that guy would have to see the morality in spending tens of millions of dollars this weekend to drop a bunker buster on a non-existent nuclear weapons program. For a guy who prides himself on never relying on an auto pen, Trump's going to need hundreds of auto pens working overtime for all the pardons he's going to have to sign. These are all war crimes. Hegseth, Rubio, everybody in Trump's Pentagon right now is committing war crimes. And they're not winning. When you commit war crimes, your saving grace is supposed to be, we had to do this in order to win. Not winning. And that's why Donald Trump is in panic mode, as 20% of the world's oil is unable to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. This has resulted in a barrel of oil costing 50% more today than it did right before Trump began bombing Iran, which seems to be able to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed indefinitely. The U.S. military, as I explained on the last show, can't escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz because Hormuz is what they call a kill box, a narrow strip of water making ships, American ships and tankers, susceptible to short-range missiles, drones, suicide jet skis, and suicide submersibles. Yes, our military could escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, but we'd end up with a lot of dead soldiers. We don't want that. Not to mention, one sunken tanker in the Strait of Hormuz clogs it indefinitely. All it takes is one tanker to be sunk in the Strait of Hormuz and nothing flows through it. And no American rescue teams can be sent in because Iran will fire on them. As I said at the top of the program, the war in Iran is entering its fourth week. The Iranian government, according to Israeli and American intelligence, is stronger today than it was before it started. Doesn't matter how much of its leadership Israel and the United States wiped out, someone replaces each leader. And they turn out to be hardliners, unwilling to surrender, unwilling to negotiate, and not afraid of martyrdom. They take these jobs knowing they're going to be killed, and they want to be martyrs. Meanwhile, the Houthis in Yemen, proxy soldiers for Iran, are preparing to clog another route for oil. That would be the Red Sea. And America is running out of missiles to stop the Houthis. A year ago, we were bombing the Houthis for firing on ships in the Red Sea. We don't have enough missiles. We don't have enough interceptors, and we don't have enough missiles, which is why Donald Trump just asked Congress. I'm sure you heard this already, but if you haven't, sit down. Donald Trump just asked Congress for $200 billion to fund his Iran war because we're running out of missiles and interceptors. Now, that $200 billion is above the $1.5 trillion Trump is planning to give the Pentagon for 2027. That's a 50% increase in spending for the Pentagon, $1.5 trillion. But that's not enough. You need $200 billion extra supplemental to pay for his Iran war. Pete Hegseth explained, well, we need the money because it costs money killing bad guys, unquote. Trump says we need the money to make sure we stay tippy-top, unquote. Do you feel tippy-top? I don't feel tippy-top. Do you think $200 billion extra dollars is going to make us feel tippy-top? NATO, the EU, won't help the United States in this war. They told Trump, don't do it. They told him, this is what's going to happen. He did it, and it happened. And now he's on his own, calling NATO ungrateful cowards for not cleaning up the mess he created. The EU's foreign policy chief is Kaja Kallas. She previously served as Prime Minister of Estonia. She said the EU has no interest in helping the United States because she said, this is not our war. Plus, Europe is exceedingly on its own when it comes to taking on Putin, as Trump continues to blame Zelensky for Russia's invasion. Always blame the victim. Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, that's a country that just joined NATO in 2023. Finland just joined NATO because of Russian expansionism. Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, now warning that thanks to Trump, there is now Europe and there is the United States. He said, at least for the time being, the two are not necessarily on the same page. Trump's war in Iran couldn't have come at a more opportune moment for Vladimir Putin. Putin's economy had zero growth, with Biden-era sanctions on Russian oil making it harder and harder to fund his war. He was racking up debt. But Trump just lifted sanctions, Biden-era sanctions on Russian oil, in order to keep the price of oil somewhat affordable. Russia now has an additional $150 million each day flowing into its coffers, and it's estimated that about 40% of Russia's war budget is funded through oil. We are now seeing oil going for more than $110 a barrel. It's gotten as high as $120 a barrel. here in the United States, where we're accustomed to cheap gas, compared at least to Europe, right now, a gallon of gas is the highest it's been in 4 years. On average, it's selling for about $3.91. They're saying be prepared to pay more than $4 a gallon, self-serve. Goldman Sachs telling investors that it's a safe bet right now to assume a barrel of oil will be selling in the triple digits going deep into 2027. It's also not unreasonable, some say, to see oil, it's not unreasonable to expect oil to start selling for $200 a barrel. Unless, of course, this war plunges the world into a global recession or a depression, in which case nobody needs oil and prices will start coming down. It's not just Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic Republic is also targeting refineries throughout the Persian Gulf. It just knocked out 17% of Qatar's it knocked out 17% of Qatar's liquid natural gas infrastructure. Qatar supplies 1/5 of the world's liquid natural gas. Donald Trump's seat cushion provides the rest. So Qatar says those drone strikes resulted in $20 billion in lost revenue. It's going to take 5 years to rebuild the 2 trains, that's what they're called, before they can get the liquid natural gas back online. This is what just 3 weeks of war, Trump's war, has done to the global oil supply. Natural gas prices have doubled in Europe. That's what a couple of Iranian drone strikes on Qatar can do. Japan is paying $1.20 for a liter of gasoline. That comes out to roughly $4.54 a gallon. It's why Japan is reportedly quietly trying to negotiate a deal with Iran that would allow tankers heading to Japan to come through Hormuz. Over the weekend, Iran openly offered Japan's tankers safe passage. This after the Prime Minister of Japan met with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and he said what he said about Pearl Harbor. Meanwhile, there are reports that Iran is starting to charge for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And because of this split between Europe and Trump, European nations are secretly negotiating with Tehran to get oil through the strait. It's also being reported Iran is planning to charge a $2 million toll per tanker for use of the Strait of Hormuz. In order to restore the world's oil supply to what it was before the strait was closed down, 100 tankers must pass through the Strait of Hormuz each day. That's an additional $200 million going to Iran. Trump telling reporters on Saturday he's not surprised by spiking oil prices, adding, honestly, I expected the gas prices to rise even higher when I launched the war. Of course he did. It's one of the reasons he launched it. Launching the war and getting the Strait of Hormuz closed results in higher prices for gas and oil. And who does that benefit? Trump's 2 biggest benefactors, Vladimir Putin and Exxon. So they're happy. They get to charge more for less work. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, saying Putin wants a long war in Iran. Zelensky said for Putin, a long war in Iran is a plus. Higher oil prices bring more money into Russia's treasury, and Putin can continue his invasion of Ukraine with the United States way too preoccupied and stretched way too thin to get in the way. And, of course, fewer weapons for Ukraine. Then there's the humanitarian toll. The Iranian Health Ministry reports more than 1,400 Iranian civilians have died since war broke out. In Israel, anywhere between 16 to 20 civilians have been killed. The United States has lost 13 service members, 200 wounded, at least 10 of them seriously. In Lebanon, where Israel launched a ground invasion attempting to take out Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed paramilitary stationed in southern Lebanon, 1 million Lebanese civilians are now displaced, 1,029 dead, including 188 children. South of Lebanon's Litani River is where most of the fighting is taking place. Traditionally, southern Lebanon is where Hezbollah fighters have launched their missiles into northern Israel. Israel has reportedly destroyed all bridges over the Litani River, essentially making it impossible for people in southern Lebanon to escape to the north. Because Israel is distracted fighting Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Israeli settlers in the West Bank are using this as an opportunity to launch at least 10 raids per day on Palestinian villages inside the West Bank. This all started when the Iran bombing campaign began because the Israeli settlers are unsupervised. There aren't enough IDF, Israeli defense soldiers, to keep them in line. Not that they keep them in line. Armed Jewish settlers are setting fire to cars, homes in the West Bank. They even set fire to an emergency room in the West Bank village of Jalud. So these Israeli settlers in the West Bank are a problem. And even for the Israeli Defense Force, IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, is condemning the Israeli settlers. After these attacks, he said, quote, "Anyone who thinks these actions contribute to security is wrong. They are morally and ethically reprehensible, and they cause extraordinary strategic damage to the Israeli Defense Forces' efforts," unquote. Well, maybe you could do a better job reining in those settlers. The settlers, they are, well, for another show. Meanwhile, the Israeli and American joint bombing campaign has reportedly struck 80,000 non-military buildings, offices, and apartments housing civilians in Iran. In Tehran, at least 500 schools have been bombed. In Tehran, not Iran. In Tehran province, 500 schools bombed by the Israeli-American joint bombing campaign. 275 hospitals also taken out. Millions are taken to the streets throughout the world, from London, Tel Aviv, Berlin, Kashmir, and of course here in the United States, calling for an end to Trump's war. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the U.S.-Israeli coalition and Iran all are probably guilty of war crimes. He said, especially when it comes to these attacks on energy infrastructure, which I'm going to talk about in a second. When you knock out refineries, forget about the environmental damage. Until we get off fossil fuel, when you knock out refineries, you're destroying much of the ingredients that go into fertilizer, thereby exacerbating famine, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. When you close the Strait of Hormuz, ships can't deliver oil and or food. So they estimate that if this fighting continues until June, 45 million additional people in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa will starve to death because of this fighting. We already have close to 1 billion people on this planet starving. During his Sunday services at the Vatican, as the Iran war enters its 4th week, American-born Pope Leo called it, quote, a scandal to the entire human family and a cry before God, unquote. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul lashed out at the Pentagon's request. They made a formal request on Friday for a $200 billion supplemental to pay for the Iran war. And Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul said, quote, "We are being asked right now to bankrupt our own country." The House Freedom Caucus is made up of ultra-right-wing fiscal hawks. They're saying they would block any attempt by Speaker Mike Johnson to pass a $200 billion supplemental. They would do it, they say. They're going to block it unless you pay for it with significant cuts to other programs. It's not like the Freedom Caucus are a bunch of doves. They're fiscal hawks. So they're saying, all right, you want your war? Cut food stamps. Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said of the $200 billion request, when does $200 billion turn into $1 trillion? Massie said he will push for passage of a war powers resolution that prohibits Donald Trump from committing ground troops to fight Iran. Trump has repeatedly promised there would be no boots on the ground. He has also repeatedly said he doesn't get the yips. That's what he calls it. I don't get the yips when it comes to putting boots on the ground. He says a lot of things. He said, I haven't made up my mind whether I'm going to send ground troops in. A recent CNN poll showing only 12% of Americans support sending in ground troops. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has announced 2,500 more Marines have been sent to the region. There are reports that Pete Hegseth has ordered the 82nd Airborne to prepare for some kind of attack, either on the island of Clog, where 90% of Iran's oil is processed, or maybe a possible attack on one of Iran's nuclear enrichment sites to seize the uranium. 3 amphibious assault ships have also been dispatched to assist in a possible ground invasion. Now, there's talk of seizing the island of Clog, where 90% of Iran's oil is processed. But we might be able, our soldiers might be able to take Clog. Not sure we can keep it. And then that doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Clog is in the Persian Gulf. So you get the oil, it still has to go through the kill box that is the Strait of Hormuz. Colorado Republican Lauren Boebert, who along with Thomas Massie broke with Trump when it came to the release of the Epstein files, Lauren Boebert once again breaking with Trump by telling reporters that she is a hard no on a $200 billion war supplemental, adding, people in my district are suffering. Why are we spending money overseas when we should be spending it here? Well, she's an effing liar. I mean, I'm glad she's going to vote no on the supplemental, but she doesn't want to spend money on people who are suffering in her district. In January of this year, the House passed a bill that would extend Biden-era Obamacare subsidies for nearly 20 million Americans. It died in the Senate, but it passed in the House. 17 House Republicans broke with Speaker Mike Johnson and voted to extend the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies. Not Lauren Boebert, who's saying people in my district are suffering. You do nothing for the people in your district. Those Obamacare subsidies expired on December 31st of 2025. The Wall Street Journal out with a report that 1 in 10 Americans who had Obamacare are now without any insurance this year because the Obamacare subsidies expired and they can't afford the premiums. 10% of Americans on Obamacare lost their health insurance since January 1st. The Wall Street Journal reporting that 17% of Americans who are still on Obamacare, 17% say they doubt they will be able to pay the premiums by the end of the year. This, as Fed Chair Jerome Powell says, in the past year, there has been zero job growth in the private sector. Let me repeat, now that I just told you that. The Pentagon is not thinking about asking for a $200 billion war supplemental. Pete Hegseth on Friday officially asked Congress for $200 billion to fight Trump's war in Iran. And Trump says, well, $200 billion, quote, is a small price to pay to make sure we stay tippy-top. Tippy-top. In addition to the $200 billion, again, that's a supplemental. A supplemental means we have a budget, an annual budget, and then when we have emergency expenses, we have to pass a supplemental. So in addition to a $200 billion war supplemental, Trump wants a 50% increase in defense spending for the 2027 budget. He wants to bump it up to $1.5 trillion. Hegseth says $200 billion is necessary to clean up a generational mess. Yes, in order to create a new generational mess. How much do you think it's going to cost to clean up one of those tankers that turns into the Exxon Valdez, you POS? The war is a disaster. Most Americans were against it before it started. Most Americans are still against it. Most Americans think it's not going well. We're being forced to pay close to $4 a gallon at the pump because of this war. And Pete Hegseth has the audacity to ask Congress for $200 billion more to fight this war. What is especially scary for me is we live in a world where people like Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Matt Gaetz are starting to make sense. Matt Gaetz is now hosting his own show on a 24-hour right-wing cable news station when he's not dodging subpoenas. Before Trump's Iran war, Matt Gaetz said that Americans would, quote, pay the price at the pump, at the grocery store, and by spilling the blood of our bravest patriots, unquote. He's against the war. Since Trump began bombing Iran, Matt Gaetz said U.S. and Israeli attacks have only succeeded in empowering Iranian hardliners and validating their anti-Western narratives, unquote. There they are. Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. This was in 2023. These were the MAGA power brokers, all taking orders from Trump, showing him blind obedience. All three have turned on him. Matt Gaetz left Congress to become Attorney General. That fizzled. Marjorie Taylor Greene quit Congress at the end of last year. She officially left Congress in January. She broke with Trump over the Epstein files, and she was really upset because he refused to do anything about the death threats she started to receive. She called him, and he said, well, you brought these death threats on yourself. They've been threatening her son. And he said, there's nothing I can do. You brought this on yourself. Marjorie Taylor Greene quit Congress in January. She's now accusing Trump of wanting to murder Iranian children instead of freeing them. Greene said the war is a complete betrayal of Trump's promise of no new wars. She said on a recent podcast, quote, "We voted for America first and zero wars. You bunch," she's now addressing Hegseth and Trump and J.D. Vance. She said, "You bunch of sick effing liars." But she didn't say effing. She used the word. She accused Trump of betraying all the people who voted for him. Then she suggested this could be all part of Trump trying to create a crisis of convenience. Green said it's conceivable that he will use the war in Iran as a national emergency, necessitating the canceling of the 2026 midterms. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. So he's losing his MAGA base. That's what conventional wisdom says. He's lost his MAGA base. Well, yeah, until, of course, they're presented with the alternative. Do you really think he's lost these idiots? If the 2024 presidential election were held today, all these people mad at Trump because of Iran, they would still vote for Trump instead of Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or anyone the Democrats nominated. This is posturing. He hasn't lost his MAGA base. Now, the midterms are a whole other issue because Trump isn't on the ballot. That's a whole other issue. So I don't find too much purchase in this MAGA schism. Is that how it's pronounced? Schism? They come back to Trump. They always do. But they might not show up in November for the midterms. Trump's former national security advisor, the odious John Bolton, who has been calling for the invasion of Iran since we invaded Iraq, he is having the last laugh at MAGA supporters' expense. During an appearance on CNN, John Bolton said his voters made the mistake of believing that Donald Trump has a consistent philosophy. You might remember Bolton broke with Trump right after Bolton left the Trump White House in 2019. He then went on to call Trump stupid, immoral, and corrupt. And Trump returned the favor in October of last year when the Trump Justice Department got Bolton indicted for violating the Espionage Act. And a lot of people think Bolton might actually be going to prison. Unlike Letitia James or James Comey, those were bogus prosecutions. A lot of people think John Bolton might have actually broken the law, that he might have violated the Espionage Act while he was national security advisor to Trump in 2018 and 2019. He was emailing his private notes to his children who were helping him write his memoir. And that, so this is the only one of Trump's vengeance prosecutions that has the added benefit of being justified. I don't think too many people are going to shed a tear if John Bolton ends up going to prison. Tucker Carlson calling the Iran war disgusting and evil. Carlson on his show shouting that Bibi Netanyahu is not in charge of our military, but with Trump as president, that appears to be the case. Right-wing pundit Matt Walsh telling his listeners the freedom of Iranians is not our responsibility. Alex Jones says Trump has accelerated the planet's trajectory towards a nuclear world war. Andrew Tate facing criminal charges in Romania and the United Kingdom for human trafficking. He's a huge Trump supporter, but he asked, why would going into a war with Iran benefit anybody in America at all? Nazi Nick Fuentes accused Israel of dragging Trump into the war. He accused Trump of being a puppet of the Jews. On Saturday, Trump gave the Iranians a 48-hour ultimatum to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, he said, I will order my military to bomb your country's power plants into oblivion. Well, that means Iran has until 7:44 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday night, to reopen the strait. As the clock ticks away, Trump is saying, I'm going to obliterate all of Iran's power plants. Well, he's made a lot of ultimatums to North Korea, Russia, Afghanistan. He's made ultimatums to Iran, the Houthis. The clock is ticking away. Trump is threatening to obliterate all of Iran's power plants. Now, the problem with ultimatums is they sound really good, but then when when it passes, when 48 hours are up and you haven't done anything and there's no follow through, you look incredibly weak. And Iran knows that. Iran responded to Trump's ultimatum by publishing maps of power grids throughout the Gulf region with a warning that read, say goodbye to electricity. The Iranians, everybody's smarter than Donald Trump, but they know how to get under his skin. And Iran is now warning Trump, if he bombs their power plants, the Strait of Hormuz will pretty much remain closed until Trump surrenders. Iran said it would target Israel's power grid and America's, and they would wreak havoc for stockholders of American energy companies. Iran is threatening to end summer here in the United States, threatening suicide bombers will be blowing up tourist destinations. All it takes is one. All it takes is one suicide attack. Iranian state media warning in the event of even the smallest attack on our energy grid, the entire region will be plunged into darkness. Trump threatening to hit Iran's biggest power station first, located roughly 70 miles from Tehran. Well, we'll find out. Do you think he's going to knock out Iran's power grid? Doing that is total war. That is total war when you knock out the power grid. And then they go for the desalination plants. They're already going for Iran is already attacking desalination plants. This thing, as all wars do, is spiraling out of control. And Trump says there will be no diplomatic resolution, only a military resolution. Iran is saying the same thing. So this is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for finding me. Please leave a comment if I made any mistakes. Let me know. I issue corrections. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. As I always say, leave a comment. Subscribe to this channel and subscribe to my newsletter. Hit the notification bell because I keep irregular hours. I do the show completely by myself, and I do my own research, so I triple check everything. It takes a while to prep the show. Now, before I go, I have a friend named Robert Smigel who sends me things to read or to look at, and he sent, now I don't know if this is artificial intelligence. Robert Smigel says it's real. So it may be artificial intelligence, but I trust Robert Smigel. This is supposedly, he says, a video of Donald Trump on top of a rocket that Donald Trump just made. He's flying over Natanz when they were bombing the nuclear facility on Saturday. You tell me if this is real.
This rocket is completely powered by my quarter-pounder and filet-o-fish duty farts. They're huge.
Now, I don't know. I'm not smart enough. I mean, I trust Robert Smigel. So he insists. He said, you should run it. It's an exclusive. Nobody's seen it. He says it's absolutely real that Donald Trump was riding an intercontinental ballistic missile on Saturday to watch the bunker buster get dropped on the Natanz nuclear site. I don't know if this is real. Let's watch it again. I don't know. Does this seem real to you? Leave a comment. I think it looks real.
This rocket is completely powered by my quarter-pounder and filet-o-fish duty farts. They're huge.
I trust Smigel. I think that's real. All right, I'm going to try to do more shows this week. Thank you for listening. And that's it. Thank you. One more time. I'm not sure. Is this real? I don't know. Hang on. Is this real?
This rocket is completely powered by my quarter-pounder and filet-o-fish duty farts. They're huge.
I think it's real.